Doctors were able to test her, tested positive, and became known as patient.
Whereas in the US, we had a really late start on that, and then kind of by that time, it was out of control. Korea has actually done such an effective job that I find myself having to 안녕하세요, 미국에서 온 조나단입니다. Yes, I'm okay living in Korea even if there's corona. Yeah, so I can still buy masks. I think every like Saturday or there's a certain day only where I can buy it. But it seems like masks are becoming more in stock too. Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about my family in the US because the situation there doesn't seem to be as well controlled as it is here in Korea. Yeah, that was definitely true. I talked to my family and everybody saw the toilet paper. Yeah, that definitely happened. That was gone. The store shelves, I had a friend in Seattle send a video of the market there and pretty much the store shelves were empty, so there's lots of buying going on. Yeah, so my family doesn't live in a big city, but even in the more rural parts of the country, they've instituted a lockdown. So my nieces and nephews are doing school from home. My brother has to work from home, so everywhere people are having to stay at home. Yeah, that's definitely right. Yep. Korea, of course, initially had a big outbreak, but since that time, it's done a very, very good job of keeping it under control. So now when people look at Korea, they're thinking, oh, what can we learn from Korea? So Korea has like best practices. I even saw that Korea developed a playbook to help other countries on how to manage the coronavirus. So Korea is the top country in terms of managing this.
Countries around the world have shut down to curb the spread of the coronavirus. But in South Korea, people are starting to come back out on the streets. Starting in late February, South Korea was reporting a sharp increase in coronavirus cases.
So early on, when Korea was the big hotspot, I had family members that were always very concerned and calling, and they were worried about me at that time. But now that it's shifted over to the US, now I'm the one who's calling them, and it feels like Korea's become maybe the safest country to be at this point.
With over 5,000 infected, they were registering some of the highest numbers of confirmed cases in the world. But then something changed. While cases in most other countries continued to rise, Korea's numbers started leveling off. Look at how this curve starts to bend. It indicates that Korea managed to contain the spread of the virus early on. And they were able to do it because they learned a valuable lesson a few years ago when they fought a different coronavirus outbreak.
One of the things that I think makes Korea a really special case is, unlike in China where there was a really heavy government-forced lockdown and you saw all sorts of pictures of a really heavy-handed approach, in Korea it's been able to be contained, but it's been mainly through citizens taking appropriate action, wearing masks, being very considerate, and it's probably because they've had experiences of outbreaks in the past.
In the following weeks, as the outbreak started spreading across the world, South Korea only had 30 confirmed cases of the virus. But despite the low numbers, health authorities had already started working with biotech companies to develop a test for the novel coronavirus. And soon, they had thousands of test kits ready to go.
I think that was a huge difference between Korea and the US is immediately Korea had enough testing capabilities and they were really rapidly testing the population, whereas in the US we had a really late start on that, and then kind of by that time it was out of control.
From most outbreak in 2015, first one is the diagnostic test, very essential. We developed a lot of diagnostic tests and distributed in every hospital.
They prepared for the worst, and the worst quickly followed. By late February, the total number of coronavirus cases rose dramatically, crossing 3,000. This made South Korea's outbreak the largest outside of mainland China. And it all started here, in Daegu, where a woman went to the hospital with a fever. Because the government had already equipped hospitals with coronavirus tests, doctors were able to test her, tested positive, and became known as patient.
One of the other actions that Korea took that I thought was really well done is, and they left much of the rest of the country still operating fairly normally. And even today, we never really had a lockdown in Seoul and the surrounding area. So you compare that to many other countries, including the US, it's like the whole country got shut down and it's freezing the economy, whereas Korea did it on a more selective basis and things have been able to continue to move along with the economy.
But the testing didn't stop there. While she was sick, patient 31 had gone to a mega church where she sat with a congregation of hundreds for more than an hour. So they traced her movements, identified people she had come into contact with, and then tested those people as well, whether they showed symptoms or not. Many of them also tested positive. so they were quickly isolated and treated at home or at a center.
Another really important thing that Korea did is, and I'm not sure how they were able to do it, but they send text messages out as soon as they understand there's a new case, so that other people who might have been in contact with that person would know if potentially they were also in contact with somebody. So the ability to do that contact tracing in Korea through the text messages and other means was also another big difference between the US and Korea. I get a lot of them. They seem to have come down more recently, but back in, I think like late February, maybe early March, somewhere in there, it was just continuous buzz. So I'm in the office and you hear everybody's phone continually going off back at that time. But now it still gets some, but much fewer.
All the people they had been in contact with were traced and tested too. This is called contact tracing the virus. Korea changed the law, allowing the government to collect a patient's data and security footage during an outbreak. All their steps are logged and then shared to alert people to stay away from the path of infection.
If there is some confirmed case found near my office, a message via smartphone, there is a confirmed case near your place. He moved some place to another place. Be cautious.
Websites and private apps compile that information, allowing everyone to see if a person with a confirmed case of coronavirus went to a pharmacy or the hospital or anywhere else.
It's a means of checking the possibility of infection.
Citizens are checking the coronavirus locations and are avoiding going to these areas.
This information lets people know if they've crossed paths with an infected person, so they can go get tested for the virus.
So as I think effective as the government response in Korea has been, I think most of the accolades should actually just go to the Korean people, because without their cooperation and without their having taken this seriously, then regardless of whatever the government did, it would have spread out of control like we're seeing in the Western countries and in the US. So I think it's a big kudos to the Korean people generally for taking this information the government provided and acting accordingly, wearing masks, avoiding certain areas. So that was well done.
Tracing people's every move can be controversial, but many in South Korea prioritize public health over privacy in an outbreak. For now, Korea has turned a corner, but they continue to be prepared.
We are very cautious to prevent the second wave. Every day is the kind of state of war.
It's that kind of vigilance that has set Korea apart in the coronavirus pandemic, but it wasn't the only place to test people aggressively. Singapore, Taiwan, and other neighbors saw the benefits of widespread testing too. Now countries like Germany and the UK are starting to implement aggressive testing, and even the US, where the government has failed to provide adequate testing, is now scrambling to test more people.
We know that we have to do more, and we continue to accelerate in testing.
Korea's strategy of contact tracing might not be easy to replicate in countries with much larger populations, but the country's success with widespread testing still offers a way out for most countries that are stuck in lockdowns.
Korea has actually done such an effective job that I find myself having to remind myself when I'm out to, okay, make sure you're wearing your mask and make sure you're still following the necessary health precautions that you should be. Especially now that the weather's getting really nice, you just kind of want to go out and kind of have your active life again. So I guess it's a testament to the fact that Korea's done so well that I'm having to continually remind myself even to keep the precautions up. So I think the Korean government did really well is they took numerous actions very effectively and immediately, which was they had the test kits ready, or they were able to produce enough test kits. And then I think also the text messages have been very effective. And like I mentioned before, I think the Korean people generally are very conscientious about this. And from their experience with previous outbreaks, they almost had a prior experience or a head start compared to a lot of the Western countries. Remember when we used to make fun of Asians for wearing masks in public? Yeah, I think nobody will be doing that anymore. And now more and more people are realizing why Asians have worn masks, and there's less of a stigma. Even when I first wore it, even here in Korea, I felt really strange about it, and now it feels completely comfortable. So South Korea is another level with this coronavirus issue. They move quickly and flatten the curve. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You can just look at the results, and today the daily numbers are very low and the number of people passing away is much lower compared to other countries, so they did a great job. Honestly, it's impossible to copy Korea. We are not Korean. We have our rules. However, we must learn lots of things from Korea. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Korea is it's got its very specific culture that made this effective, but there can still be lessons learned that can be applied to other countries as well. South Korea, aggressive testing, contact tracing on confirmed case as anonymous. Other countries, human rights are the most important in quarantine and lockdown. I think what makes Korea special in this case is that the citizens are being cooperative about this, and I think they're maybe less suspicious of their government because their government has handled this effectively. Whereas in the US, it hasn't been handled effectively and there's a lot more suspicion about what government's doing with the data. So that trust that the Korean people have, and maybe legitimately they should have in their government for how it acted, has proven to be really effective in handling this coronavirus. So today we talked about how Korea handled the pandemic, both the government and the people. And I'm impressed, the whole world has been really impressed with Korea. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe below. 안녕!